Welcome everyone to HITEC Live. I am so happy to have you all here. My name is Kelly Francis, and I have the honor of leading HITEC's philanthropic arm, the HITEC Foundation, which supports the next generation of technology talent through scholarships, mentorship, and career development support. If this is your first HITEC Live, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is our virtual series where we bring together the technology community to connect, share, and grow. These sessions are informal conversations where we get to hear from our partners and community members on topics that touch on technology, leadership, and everything in between. Today is going to be pretty fun. As organizations embrace AI-driven productivity, the rise of shadow AI presents new risks and new leadership challenges. Today, our partners, Palo Alto Networks, will be leading a discussion on organizations balancing AI innovation, all while maintaining security and governance. Please join me in welcoming Edgardo Perez from Palo Alto Networks to kick us off.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to meet you. I lead our inclusion and people programs at Palo Alto Networks. So I got the pleasure in part to find different ways to embed the value of inclusion across our business, but then also work with organizations like HITEC to connect folks around ideas and resources. So I'm really grateful for our opportunity to be here today and lead this conversation around securing agentic AI. And one of the things that, as us being architects of growth, we know that you don't build anything of value on a shaky foundation. So in this room, we know security well, I'm sure, and it's because it's part of how we've always worked. But as we move into agentic AI, we're moving from systems that just store data to systems that actually get to work and take action on our behalf. And that shift doesn't require just trusting systems, but it also means that we build systems that are stronger than ever. From our data to the agents themselves, we need the tools that we create and systems to be able to handle that new power. So today we're going to look at how do we reinforce that foundation so that our ideas and tools and what we build remains under control. So let's look at it from a numbers perspective first. Okay, so you all probably know security or breaches can be really expensive to most companies, at least the part that you can measure. How many of you can guess that the average cost or the global average cost for a breach is $4.4 million or more? This doesn't include brand trust. It doesn't include customer trust. So it's really important for us to all to think as we build and grow organizations to be able to speak also the business value of continuing to invest in securing AI. Separately, we have a team called Unit 42 that focuses on threat intelligence and incident response. And last year, they worked on over 750 cases. And what they found was that the shortest breaches had an average of 72 minutes from initial access to infiltration. That's about as long as it takes for me to wake up every day because I'm stuck on IG scrolling. So you can imagine how quickly it is for folks to be able to have to catch up. And in fact, some argue that you can't rely simply on human coordination when you have less time to intervene. The other point that I'll also acknowledge is that when we look at studies that interview leaders, some of them are finding that nearly almost 100% of organizations know that they have some sort of visibility deficit that's pretty significant to their organization, which leads us into the shadow AI conversation. So we'll define this further, but shadow AI is often known as sort of this concept when employees or internal actors, they go and they use external AI tools, which puts the organization that they work for potentially at risk or that they're a part of. And we're seeing that more and more. There's a big jump in concern around shadow AI, particularly 61% in just the past year alone. The last thing I'll share is that another consistent theme that our Unit 42 found is the role of identity. And attackers are increasingly logging in rather than breaking into systems. So that means that once they gain access to credentials, they can move laterally, escalate privileges, and then access sensitive systems while appearing to be a legitimate tool or user. So identity is becoming this hotter topic. You might have been hearing it more recently, where it functions as a control plane for decreasing risk or managing risk. So the more weakness we have when it comes to identity, the more organizations are vulnerable in this era of securing AI. Now, if you're as scared as I am after going through all these statistics, you're probably like, oh my gosh, what can we do about this? But this conversation is more about the other part, like what can we do from an organizational perspective, from a strategic, but then also from a building and infrastructure perspective. And that's where I'll pass it over to Stephen, who is a solutions architect at Palo Alto Networks. Also, if you haven't heard of Palo Alto Networks, we are the largest cybersecurity company in the world. Some say the leading cybersecurity company in the world. And we are about 20,000 employees. So Stephen is one of those, and the experts in this room, one of those folks who are helping us solve through these issues every day. Stephen, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you very much, Edgardo. Yeah, so kind of to keep this conversation rolling on the topic of identity, I wanted to zoom in on the topic of identity and access management as it pertains to agentic AI. So as part of my role, I work with and I follow identity providers in the space, and more we're seeing this industry-wide push to start to layer identity security onto agents. And at the core of this, I've observed something that I kind of consider to be fundamental. And that is that agents by design, although they can act autonomously, they often lack a first-class identity in our IDPs. And so when users interact with an agent, where does the boundary exist between actions performed by the user and actions performed by the agent? So I present to you a mental model of sorts to kind of help with this distinction. And it's something that I use when I kind of think through this, and that is impersonation versus delegation. And a good analogy I like to think of for this is the concept of a business credit card. So like imagine a business that has a business credit card that they basically share amongst their employees, and the employees sort of pass it around whenever they need to make purchases. This technically works, but as you can imagine, at the end of the month, when the business owner needs to kind of review transactions, it makes it really difficult to discern which employee bought what and at what time. So that is impersonation. And in contrast, now imagine that each employee has their own business credit card, both with the business name on it and their own names. That is delegation. So now let's sort of unpack this distinction in the context of agentic AI. So here's a scary thought. So speaking anecdotally, impersonation is by far the most common identity pattern that I've encountered, both internally and also publicly. And you might be asking yourself why that is. Well, it's a simple answer. It's easy. It's very easy to just take the user access token and just hand that over to an agent and then have it go off and do whatever task you might have. But with that, we are trading some risks. And at the top of those risks is identity confusion. So as I mentioned, when you do this, when you do impersonation, it makes it really difficult to discern who's acting. Is it the user? Is it the agent? The other complexity with this that gets added is the fact that it's really hard to control permissions. So the fact is, when you hand that token over to an agent, it inherits the permissions of that user and everything that that user token is able to do. And this leads into the next risk, which is the risk of credential theft. So as you can imagine, if that credential is stolen, attackers can go to town with it, right? And they have the full permissions of the user. And it makes revocation hard. So this concept of revocation is like, what if you have a rogue agent that you need to revoke the permissions for? Well, this makes it really difficult because since you can't separate the two, you end up having to revoke the user, which obviously is going to lead to an unhappy user, but it's also just not practical. In contrast to that is the concept of delegation. And so delegation is the pattern that I believe is most aligned with how we interact with agents today. And yeah, agents, they can be long running, they can perform autonomous tasks. That's all great. But most of the time, we're actually delegating to an agent, meaning like we're actually asking the agent to do things on our behalf. And this is where delegation, I think, fits perfectly. One of the strengths of it is that it's least privileged by design. And what that means is that you have control over the actual permissions along the way as you delegate. And something else is that it's actually bound to the destination. So in this case, if I'm talking to an agent, I can mint a token that is specifically meant for that agent. And I can do this along the way across multiple hops and persist or propagate the identity from one hop to the other. Now, this naturally improves auditing because now you have this clear audit trail of when the user delegated to the agent and when the agent maybe talked to another agent along the chain, et cetera, et cetera. And this also leads to much better revocation strategies. So if you do have a rogue agent, now you can just go and revoke the one agent rather than having to revoke everything or worse, revoke the user. But there are also some trade-offs here that you need to consider. And one of them is you need to have an IDP first and foremost that supports this. And secondly, there's some additional complexity and like operational complexities that kind of come into play here in terms of configuration and making sure that you have the full end-to-end scope to permission mapping in place. Okay, so the good news is there's already a lot of sufficient prior art that's available today that is able to solve this for us. And a lot of that comes from OAuth. The thing with OAuth is that, I mean, it was naturally designed for this kind of thing. It's also been around for 10 plus years. So it's quite old. And I don't think that the designers of it envisioned this feature, right? Where now we're delegating to agents. But nonetheless, the OAuth protocol is like really, really good at solving this problem. And one of the reasons for that is this concept of a delegated authorization pattern, which I will get into more. Something else is that it basically allows you to have a much cleaner separation between actions performed by the user and the agent. And what makes this possible is something that's called token exchange. So token exchange, just in a nutshell, is a way for you to leverage your IDP to swap one token, so like in this example, a user token, for another one, while at the same time preserving the user's identity. And the nice thing is the users don't have to re-auth to do this. It just happens seamlessly. And the added bonus of this is that you also have control over the specific permissions when you do this. So when you swap the token, you can decide to downscope or lessen the permissions, or you can add entirely new permissions depending on like what the next hop needs in order to continue the delegation, right? So I could kind of talk you through the mechanics of this, but I'd rather show you. So let me share here. Presenting a simple demo that kind of illustrates token exchange and this delegation pattern. So what I'm showing you here is a mini lab that I built. And this lab is pretty straightforward. We have a web application, which is what I'm actually accessing right now. And this web app talks to a number of MCP servers along the path. The first hop is what I refer to as an MCP gateway. So it's basically an MCP server that does nothing more than route to the next hop. So depending on what the input is, it might send me to the Jira MCP server or a GitLab MCP server. Down at the very bottom, I have both Jira and GitLab represented here. And the thing that I want to highlight is this section here. They're all under the same authorization server, which is Okta. And then down here at the bottom, both Jira and GitLab are part of their own authorization servers. And this is a pretty common architecture that you might encounter. Some of you, this might ring true for you today. And this page here that I'm showing you is sort of a visual flow of one hop to the other. And you're going to very quickly see how this works. The end goal is for, obviously, me as a user to be able to talk to Jira. So my first step is to log into Okta. And after I do this, you'll start to see each of these hops sort of propagate with the tokens for each hop. The key thing to note here, just so you know, there's nothing up my sleeves. If I try to access Jira issues right now, I get a not authorized error, right? So then the question is, how do we solve that? But before we get there, I want to show you how this identity propagation works. So the first hop, when I logged into to Okta, I performed something that's called OpenID authentication. And that was basically a way for me to authenticate with Okta and basically attest that I am a Okta user and that I'm authorized. And what it gave me back was a token that represents me, as you see here in this subject claim. And one thing you'll notice is that along the way, I performed token exchange for both the MCP gateway, the Jira MCP server. And one thing that should stand out is that the subject remains the same. It's still me from one hop to the next. Now, this is what I'm referring to as identity propagation. And this is at the core of how delegation works. But at the last hop, we still don't have access to Jira. So let me fix that. I head over to my integrations tab, and now I'm going to authorize access to Jira. Now, when I do this, this is kicking off another OAuth flow, which is called the authorization code flow. And most of you have probably seen something like this. In this case, I'm being prompted by Jira. It's asking me whether or not I want to consent for this web application to have access to Jira issues. So in this case, I'll click allow, and that'll redirect me back. And now that I've done that, if I click on issues again, you'll see that I can see the Jira issues now. All right, so that concludes my demo. So I will hand it back to Edgardo. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate the notes around thinking about scaling and using tokens to help protect the identity at every step along the way. So I appreciate you sharing that. So then without further ado, I would like to open up to our panel. I'll share my screen one last time. We have, in addition to Stephen, we have two of really awesome experts here from Palo Alto Networks. So up first, I have Mei Wang, who is our Chief Technology Officer of IoT Security. And then I have Mark Benoit, who is our SVP and CISO at Palo Alto Networks and former executive sponsor of the Juntos Employee Latinx Employee Network Group. So thank you so much for joining us, and Stephen. So I have a few questions for you. I'll stop sharing so that we can focus on our panelists. The first one is, Stephen, you just shared us an example of some of the work that you do. Can you tell us more about your role? What drew you to cybersecurity? And, this is a very dynamic and challenging industry. How do you keep yourself grounded outside of work so that you have your cup full to deal with these really complex problems on a regular basis?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess first and foremost, I've been in this industry a really long time, going on, I guess it's 20 plus years now. And along the way, I've kind of worn kind of many different hats. I got into cybersecurity. I mean, it was sort of one of those things where I had a specialty, like I had a lane that I was in. And I had already done some firewall administration, et cetera. But then one day I took a role as like information security analyst, and that's what kind of got me thinking more about the security mindset and like how to take my experience and like adapt that into like a new role. So that's kind of how I got into it. This was working at a university, so I got to see a lot of crazy things, but it stuck. And eventually I got noticed by a Palo Alto Networks product manager when they came out to visit us one day. And that's what led to the opportunity to join Palo Alto Networks. So my current role is I'm on the innovation team. So we are sort of product adjacent, but we also fall under a part of InfoSec. So our role is sometimes described as being smoke jumpers. So as these new kind of novel threats are making their way onto the scene, our team is usually tasked with like diving in to kind of be the first line of like, okay, how do we actually defend against this stuff, and what product innovations might we need to kind of further that cause? And that's kind of my day-to-day role.
Awesome, thank you. And then how do you keep yourself charged outside of work?
Ooh, I like to travel. I like spending time with family. I have a big family, and I sort of live between North Carolina and Texas. So I love going home to Texas, visiting with the family, just barbecuing. Those are the things that kind of keep me grounded. And on the flip side, I'm always curious. So I'm always kind of plugged into what's going on with AI. That's just like something that I enjoy doing. So it doesn't lead to burnout with work or anything, because it's just something that's always come natural to me. So staying grounded, I think, is more about trying not to do that, to trying to unplug sometimes. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the role of family in that. So.
Thank you. And May, so what about you? Can you share more about your role? What drew you to this space, and how do you stay charged outside of work?
Sure. My name is May, like the month of May. I am the CTO for IoT security at Palo Alto Networks. I co-founded a company called Zingbox years ago that we were the first one using AI for IoT security. And we were acquired by Palo Alto Networks about more than 6 years ago. So my daily job is to work with data scientists and security researchers to do innovation in terms of AI for cybersecurity and cybersecurity for AI. So that actually gives me lots of energy and excitement. I'm working with an amazing team of data scientists and security researchers. Every time there's a new model comes out, we look into its security uh, uh, capability measurements, and we actually publish a 34-page prompt attacks to look into all kinds of ways to of these large language models, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the new security issues, etc. And outside of my work, because I'm so passionate about AI, I actually spend lots of time, and also I'm very passionate about women in high tech. So I spend lots of time working with next generation technologists, whether it's helping them find their next journey or looking to the latest large language models and AI advancements. That's very, very exciting. It's changing every day.
That's awesome. I love that. Paying it forward. Thanks, May. And then what about you, Mark? Last but not least.
Well, I'm affectionately referred to as an accidental CISO. I get voluntold to do this. This is my second tour of duty as CISO, and I have the good fortune of working with industry luminaries and visionaries as Stephen and May, who are very humble people and far smarter than I am. Every time there's a tectonic shift in tech, I seem to get pulled back in. It's like that scene in The Godfather. Every time I try and get out, they pull me back in. AI is creating a completely different ethos in cybersecurity, and it's about to shift again. And that requires not only new thinking, but this is why the innovation team, office of the CTO, people that actually can create new models like May have come together in order to solve these problems. This will be endemic of critical infrastructure, kind of a whole new world of discovering vulnerabilities just dropped like last week. And I feel like every day I come into work and it's a brand new world and new threats. So I had no gray hair 6 months ago. And now it's all white like Santa Claus. So this is how we roll.
Awesome. And yeah, I'm wondering if you can share maybe what's one thing you do outside of work.
Oh, this is like leading the witness here. I'm huge on food security. So I've got a passion project that I crank out about 200 kilos a week of sourdough and about 50 kilos a week of dried pasta from flour that I mill, that I source from regenerative organic farmers within my about a 50 to 100-mile range. And that goes to food insecure families in my community. And I'm trying to scale that up and solve world hunger in my spare time. But that keeps me sane in this world of cybersecurity and AI craziness.
I appreciate that, Mark. Such important problems that we need to solve, and appreciate all the work that you all do to help us get to a better world. So awesome. That said, I'll ask one more personal question, right? We'll talk about AI in the enterprise. But if you could build a personal AI agent for yourself, what have you built? What would you like to build, and why?
Who do you want to address that first?
We can start, Mark. Why don't we start with you since you just went last?
Sure. I have an agent, and I'd had this one conceived for a long time before I implemented it. I hate status reports. And for a long time, I viewed email as a vehicle to get out of having to send my boss status reports. I was just waiting for the Agentic technology to catch up to my brain, over the past decade. So I take a summation of all of the emails that I get. I look for metrics and statistics within them. I poke holes in areas that I might need additional information in. And from the perspective of CISO, Gemini, my backend LLM and agentic infrastructure, creates CISO questions and automatically doles it out to my employees to solicit more information. And then we add that to our daily stand-up meeting requests. So I've eliminated the amount of time that it takes to kind of formalize these weekly status reports and got a lot of productivity in my own personal life back.
That is really impressive, and I need a copy of that for myself. What about you, Mayor Stephen?
Yeah, outside my main lane of work, I actually, as I mentioned, I actually spend quite some time mentoring next generation technology talent, especially young female technologists. I do see there's a gap. On one side, all these enterprises, organizations are looking for AI talent. On the other side, these new grads coming out of great schools, great major, they have such a hard time to find their first job. So I wish there's kind of a agent can. Right now, I spend lots of time talking to the employers, potential employers, talking to the new grads, and try to do matchmaking. I wish there's an agent can automate the whole process, make everything more smoothly, can create a win-win situation.
Love that. That sounds like a great business idea. Thanks, May. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, so it's been kind of like this side project idea that I've had for a while, but a LLM-powered or agentic-powered recommendation system for choosing where to eat. I don't know about you all, but like one of the hardest things that to do sometimes is for my wife and I to choose a place to eat. And we struggle. Doesn't matter if we have a list of restaurants already in mind, or I mean, and what complicates it more is like when you're traveling somewhere, right? So what I would hope to have one day is the ability to just like have an agent alongside of me, sort of assisting with that, and which with the selections, it would be able to deep dive on the restaurants, understand the vibe, the menu options, what I like to eat, kind of learn my profile, and then just decide for me. So that's something that I would love to see.
You already have that, Stephen. That's your wife. My wife tells me where I'm going to eat all the time.
I mean, in theory, it should be like that, but you don't know how many times she just reflects it back to me and is like, "Oh, what do you think?" And it's just back and forth. But
it's a conversation. I hear that. All right, now let's bring it back to the enterprise. So this question's for Mark. You know, for those of us who aren't in the weeds of cybersecurity every day, I know I gave a high-level definition, but can you explain shadow AI in simple terms? And why is this such a business-critical issue that every leader or every employee, not just the CISO, should care about right now?
Yeah, thanks, Agaro. That's a great question. So all of us at every company, I don't care what your role is, which industry you're in, what vertical, whatever, we all are getting top-down pressure to find efficiencies through the use of these AI tools. In some cases, you have a sanction suite. In some cases, it's go off and learn and find what tool works best for the application. In all of these cases, I wish we could go back in time to where data leakage was my only problem as CISO. Now, as Edgardo alluded to in the beginning, these are connected systems. So when you have a agent that you're bringing to bear, and as Stephen demonstrated for us, if it's impersonating the user, our security operations center can't distinguish because it's coming from Stephen's machine and talking to an application that Stephen frequently uses, that it's an agent instead of Stephen. So this becomes very challenging from a guardrail perspective of how we can even enumerate if an agent's going off the rails. A lot of these things can have unintended consequences, but this lack of observability and visibility makes it next to impossible to catch when this new supply chain of agents is infiltrated by an adversary and is leveraged in order to actually attack your infrastructure. We saw several this week, novel ones alone, multi-stage supply chain attacks, including light LLM, where auto update as a mechanism was used in order to install malware that caused compromise in these environments. So not only do you need to be kind of a savvy user in order to use the tools and obtain that efficiency that the exec team is looking for, You also now need to put on your cybersecurity hat and say, what am I giving this access to? How do I ensure, as we're rolling this out for an enterprise application, that I'm not exposing sensitive or critical data in a way that it wasn't intended to be leveraged, or exposing it outside of our company? And those exposures now are crazy. Like we've created a monster in the form of this agentic AI infra, and it's only getting worse. Like I had our CFO asked for Claude Code the other day, and we can all laugh at that from a developer point of view. Like, what the heck is the CFO going to do with Claude Code? But his peers are effectively reinventing the way that financial services exist within the company and the CFO's org operates, and they're getting tremendous efficiency out of it. So there's pressure at the highest level to redefine the way that operations work. So that's the in a simple way, the exposure and crazy world we live in.
Yeah, and I appreciate that explanation. And I know that, from my understanding too, part of the issue is this challenge between meeting employee needs who are trying to innovate and build things and find solutions really quickly, but then also the speed at which the business is moving, especially, in our space of cyber. So I'm curious, like, how do you help find a balance or build an internal culture that balances the two of not just allowing unauthorized use, but then also there's like this sanctioned innovation that happens as well.
Was that addressed to me again?
Yes, sorry, Mark. That's for you. And I'm actually curious here, May and Steven's thoughts on that too.
Yeah, so I actually come from the office of the CPO and CTO. So I'm an innovator by default, again, mentioned accidental CISO. I don't like controls that are designed for the sake of control, because the harder I make it for people to do their jobs and get things done, they will find a way to circumvent the controls, and then you lose the ability to actually observe and protect. I liken it to Jurassic Park life. It will find a way to exist and ultimately win out. And unless you embrace that and try and meet people with what it is they're trying to do. So really, you have to educate people as to the use cases they're trying to perform, like what is the actual task, and not just we're at this weird intersection of FOMO and YOLO for like all developers. When they come in every day, they've read about a new tool, they want to use it. So people need to understand that they're increasing the risk to the org when they're walking in the door and wanting to use all these new tools. The people in cybersecurity and on the enablement side in IT need to understand, though, that in order to meet the intent of the business, we have to embrace this and give people the tools that they need to do their job. So we take things that are not considered core IP source code, we open those up, we do pilots with net new tools. We never stagnate in our point of view of what's new. And we've signed up for every early access program under the sun for all of these foundation models. And we're at the bleeding edge of how to enable developer productivity, because that's what honors the intent of our business to really, truly be the leaders in AI for cyber and cyber for AI.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think anything else you'd add to that, May or Steven? If not, I have a follow-up question for you, May, as well.
Yeah, sure. Actually, as you might have seen the statistics, that survey shows more than 50%, sometimes even up to 80% of employees using AI that's not supported by IT. And as Mark said, that because there's new AI tools coming out every single day and give us so much efficiency and save us lots of effort. So it's very tempting to go out of the IT management and to use all these new tools. And I'm from the engineering side, and there are so many amazing code generation tools and summary tools. You can use it for performance evaluation, etc. And I feel at Palo Alto Networks, we are very, very lucky and fortunate to have amazing CISO like Mark, because we bug him all the time, because there's so many new tools coming out that our engineers want to get our hands on. And I think it's a tough balance to keep the innovation, keep the adoption tools adoption speed at the same time make them secure and safe for people to use. And especially, I think the CISO's job at a company like Palo Alto Networks is even, the bar is even higher because we are, the largest cybersecurity companies, and our customers are actually look up to us for best practice. I don't know how many times Mark has to kind of be the trailblazer to experiment, to explore the new territories of all these new AI tools and then share the best practices to our customers. So I think it's we're very fortunate to have this close partnership with our CISO and the product development so that we can on one side leverage all these amazing tools as soon as possible, at the same time use them safely.
That's so important. I'm glad you pointed that out. And I'm curious, as your team conducts research on these agentic AI tools that are coming up, and you're also piloting them as well, what are some of the vulnerabilities that you're seeing with agentic AI in this line of work?
Yeah, very, very good question. We are more from product and research perspective, and we work very closely with Mark and CISO teams to look into the new vulnerabilities every time there's a new AI model comes up and there's a new AI tools infrastructure comes up. And we actually see lots of vulnerabilities. We actually published a report that shows that different models, we try different attacks, jailbreaking, prompt injection, etc. And in some cases, we can reach 88% success rate, which means out of 10 times we try to break the guardrail of this model, 9 out of 10 times we can succeed, which is very concerning. Yeah. And also last week, we actually just published another research blog that's showing that by a method called fuzzing, which means if I give a prompt to this model, say, how do you build a bomb? And the model will likely to tell me back, say, I'm not supposed to tell you all these details. But if I change my prompts in a very simple way to randomly shuffle the words and put in some gibberish into it, and then I send to the model, then the model can be easily tricked to tell me all the information and details that it's not supposed to tell me. So we actually see all kinds of vulnerabilities. And also for the large language models, it's not like, okay, we do a traditional software. We build the software, we do a pen test, and then we can ship the software. For large language models, during the usage of these large language models, there can be lots of security vulnerability and security issues bring in while the customers are using like prompt attacks. That's why we did detailed analysis on all different kind of prompt attacks and what are the definitions, what are the examples, and what are the things we can do to prevent these kind of prompt attacks. So in summary, we see lots of new security challenges brought in because of AI. That's why it's very important to have enter this new era of security to better protect and detect all these AI usage.
That's super helpful. And that number, 88%, that's pretty scary. So it definitely really speaks to another way of why this is so important for us to stay on top of it and also think ahead. Stephen, I have a question for you, and then I do want to pause for questions for the audience. We want this to be a conversation. So in a second, you can use the chat, you can unmute yourself, and then we can go back to the questions we have. But first, Stephen, a question for you is, so we've talked about some of these risks and vulnerabilities, right? Can you share more around like how do you build, what should be the requirements for a secure sandbox for developers or engineers to help them stop them from using consumer grade or unvetted AI tools in the spirit of innovation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. Although I do work directly like on technical solutions to solving that. Something else that I often rely on too is just empathy, like developer empathy, user empathy. because there is obviously a lot of excitement around using some of these tools. And the recent supply chain attacks kind of underscore that. I mean, now attackers are taking advantage of that excitement in order to find opportunity to exploit, right? So when you're thinking about a secure sandbox, I mean, there's many different facets to it. Part of that is looking at the supply chain itself and understanding, okay, what are all the various tools and libraries that people are excited about using? And so once you do that, you're now tasked with doing like a security assessment of those tools and libraries. And so we have teams that actually handle that internally, right? They have to go in deep dive on these libraries. They have to do a security scan. They have to understand what are the vulnerabilities there. And then the end goal is to eventually end up with a version of it that we have sufficient trust of that can now be used internally, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is just understanding the tools themselves, and especially given the non-deterministic nature of LLMs, right? Understanding that sometimes you need guardrails, right? You need to be able to contain the agent or the LLM or the tool. Right now, too, we're seeing a lot like sort of this explosion around building harnesses, which are basically like the vehicle that agents use to sort of drive, like with the LLM being like the engine. And that is like, yeah, that's something that has sort of led to this sort of, almost like a cascading issue of like, okay, well, with the new harnesses, now you have all these other dependencies you have to scan for in the supply chain. And yeah, it's just, it's a lot to keep up with, but ultimately the goal is to try to find a way to safely enable this. So it's something that we have to get into and we have to sort of immerse ourselves in. There's just no way around it. You have to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a village. So it's a good call out. Awesome. So then we want to pause here to hear what questions do folks have on the call. Again, we have 3 awesome experts, 3 different areas of the business. And we're curious to see what questions do folks have around securing agentic AI, or maybe even cyber and AI in general. And you can go off mute, you can raise your hand, you can use the chat, and we can answer those whichever way that you prefer. Some folks need a second to chat.
Don't be shy.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What you guys think should come first? Should we start like securing it first? Should we start developing it first? Like what should come first? I guess like probably securing it first, right? But sometimes there's a little bit of ambiguity there. So I just want to hear your thoughts.
I have an opinion here because I co-chaired our AI model committee and started from the beginning. Indemnification and contractual vehicles come first. So make sure you've got legal counsel, chief privacy officer, or chief IP legal person to help you and CISO or CIO to identify kind of the enterprise tools that you want to begin with. And make sure as a contractual vehicle, you're taking care of things like zero data retention in areas that you care about, to build the basic guardrails to protect the business. Then let's start with a limited scope R&D with dummy data, and keep that sandboxed from an exposure perspective, and then look at broader scale rollout, data access, and how you would introduce it at scale to solve actual business problems.
We have another question in the chat from Anthony Rolone. May, you mentioned that you publish resources to read up on. Is there a link to a blog place for the audience to keep up to date with that research?
Yeah, definitely. We, as I mentioned, we published a 34-page white paper about prompt attacks, and also that's on our company's website. We have lots of blogs, and last week we published this fuzzing method to break to break the guardrail of large language models. And also we have Unit 42 that we publish lots of the latest vulnerabilities and malware that we discovered. So just go to our website, paloaltonetworks.com. You find lots of resources.
We can share direct links to the blog so that you guys have direct access to them as well.
Definitely.
Do we have any other questions? If not, I have a question for you, Mark. You're talking to CISOs and C-suite leaders all the time. How do you communicate the value proposition of investing in security when there's so many competing priorities for agentic AI or other AI or new technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy these days. Almost every CISO I talk to is either actively dealing with incidents in their identity space or supply chain. It's very common now from an attack vector perspective. And the business always cares more when there's active incidents. That's just the nature of the beast. So as CISO, I quarterly update our security committee for our board. So I do a little bit of education there. And then also I'm big on metrics. So I do a look back on incidents that we've got in the past 5 to 6 months and track our performance, and then look to skate to the puck for where the trends and issues are coming. The controls that we've had in place in enterprise security for the last 2 decades have been largely focused with trust relationships between humans and applications at human scale. Those days are over. Like this is a brave new world, and I've not run into. In the last 3 to 4 weeks, we had RSA and a trip to New York. I've spoken to about 125 CISOs and CIOs. Not one of them asked me, is this really a problem? Like everybody's aware that they've got to contend with this. So we have to design a new mechanism by which we can build controls and interrupt that trust model of user to application in order to really be cognizant of the machine identity, the human as an identity, and ultimately agentic identities.
That's super helpful. Yeah. I mean, I think the environment is causing us to your point, just to all really think about it and what can we do? And we have a question from Amaury. Which third-party tools, plugins, connectors create the biggest network risk? Who wants to take that on?
All of them. Stephen, do you have an opinion on this? Stephen?
Yeah, so I think, one that comes to mind is MCP, or the Model Context Protocol. I mean, this is a way to basically give agents access to tools so they can interact with both the digital and the real world in some cases. And those can be wrought with risks, right? Because in many cases, folks are deploying MCP servers that they found on GitHub, right? So just like some open source project by someone out there, on the web. So that introduces a lot of risks, right, around supply chain, also agency, right? Like, what do these tools do? What do they have access to? What do you layer on top of that in terms of identity and authentication? One of the anti-patterns I see a lot of is folks just using things like API keys or static credentials for authorizing these agents to talk to whatever, like be it Gmail or Jira, doesn't matter. And the problem with that is that, this is the clear anti-pattern when it comes to security. This violates least privilege. It exposes the credentials to credential theft, right? Possibilities. So that's something that I encounter a lot that I wanted to call out.
Thank you. And then we have another question from Eric. What region on the planet do you see the biggest attacks? And what are they primarily targeting? Individuals, commercial?
So from a region of the planet is indiscriminate, because most adversaries actually proxy through other providers like DigitalOcean. So it's a global problem. There are significant nation state and criminal adversaries that are well funded that do a lot of targeting. So all of that is short to say that the adversary landscape is global. motivation is very different. So it depends on your vertical line of business. For me, the last thing I want to be is a supply chain attack vector for our customers, being the largest cybersecurity partner of choice. So I have to be very diligent in nation state adversaries that are targeting us for a majority of the year. With the AI landscape, this is lowering the cost and the bar for adversaries to attack. So people that might not have ordinarily targeted you for your specific industry or not found you to be low-hanging fruit before can now leverage these agentic tools to find weaknesses in your peripheral network or applications that allow them to leverage identity and other low-hanging fruit or software supply chain to get into your environment. And as Edgardo had pointed out, from a timing perspective, as defenders, we now have significantly less time. We have to deal with all threats that come into Palo Alto Networks. My gold standard is less than 20 minutes. Because within 72 minutes, if an adversary has actually impacted your environment, they're already identifying and exfiltrating your crown jewel data.
Absolutely. I think we have a question from Leonore. Thanks, Mark. Leonore?
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for your time and sharing your expertise with us. Quick question. So I know that we discussed certain methods that are used for authenticating users and agents, but can you tell us, or have you spotted a sort of emerging trend in the industry, like during the past 2 to 3 years, that you can tell us, like, this is something that the industry is following and seems to be a best practice for authorizing and identifying agents? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I can take that. Yeah, one thing that I'm seeing, I mean, not even over the last 3 years, maybe over the last 3 months, I feel like the industry seems to be converging on this more holistic view of identity and access management. So everything from identifying who the user is and what they have access to, and also the workloads themselves too. So basically taking workload identity and user identity and then munging the two together into something altogether different but familiar. And there's various papers out there. There's some IETF drafts that you can read up on. One of them is workload identity for multi-system environments, otherwise known as WMSI, that I think is a good read because it's taking all of these like pre-existing protocols and standards and basically just combining them together, right, to complete the picture of how we secure everything from like the actual workload to the user identity, and we handle delegation. We allow the agent to act, on its own behalf, right? Sometimes autonomously. So that would be an area that I would pay special attention to. The other thing that I'm seeing is that like IDPs that are in this space, I think they're also all converging on this stuff. And at some point, it's all just going to be table stakes, right? We're just going to come to expect our IDPs to support this type of architecture, this type of way of layering identity security on top of AI. So that's something that I'm also paying really close attention to, and I'm excited to see like where this goes.
To be clear, though, you really don't need to reinvent the wheel. And part of the elegance of what Stephen presented is actually the simplicity using existing tools and our existing IDP to solve the problem. It's easy as practitioners to think that we need a net new solution in space and to totally revamp the way that we do identity at an organization. And depending upon the vintage of your company, the number of users and the complexity of that can take years. So I like Stephen usually coins the phrase, what's old is new again. But there are existing protocol standards and implementations with the tools that you already have that can help you get observability and control over this. That, with some of the novel protections, as May alluded to, for evaluating what goes in and comes out of these large language models like our Prisma AIRS product, allow you to actually create a control plane that addresses these issues with a high degree of fidelity and integrity.
Awesome. Thanks for adding to that. And thanks for that question, Lenore. I know we're almost at time, so we have 2 more questions. One, what is a good approach when deciding on the appropriate size for a cybersecurity team tasked with implementing an agentic AI solution?
Are you going to stick me with that one? Just
I was
because I'm
going to
the
ask you
CISO?
first,
Yeah.
since you volunteered.
There's a lot of dependence there. Part of the challenge is that many organizations face on the operational side of cybersecurity is that they're stuck manually triaging a lot of alerts. So what I'll call, they're in a reactive mode. You can't add net new things if your cup is already overflowing with the daily workload. So first and foremost, you have to figure out how to solve that problem with either AI or automation that enables your analysts to be in what I'll consider more of a proactive mode. When you have achieved that, and my analysts, I've got the same 15 analysts both times as CISO, the same person runs SOC for me and has been here for a long time. That's where you get to uncover this new attack surface and start really building net new detections and response playbooks for how to deal with this stuff. So I actually don't need a large team to tackle this. I need a team that has the mental capacity and free cycles to basically go build it. So we haven't like drastically increased hiring. Like I mentioned, it's the same 15 analysts that handle that for our 23,000 employees. I do have the luxury of having the CTO's office engineers, people like Steven, that I can smoke jumper or paratrooper in to help solve these problems and build some novel tools. And we're always happy to have conversations with you guys to help you get better cybersecurity outcomes and share practitioner to practitioner how we built those programs.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that, Mark. One more question, and maybe May, you can help us with this one. When exposing chat agents, what guardrails should we put into place to prevent attackers from using these agents to either access data or bypass its intended purpose? There was a joke on LinkedIn where someone used a fast food chain's customer service agent to generate Python code. Would love to hear more about that joke, but I'm curious, maybe you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, when we talk about guardrail, actually all models have certain degree of guardrails at different layer and different degrees. And not only we need to make sure the models are safe, we also need to make sure data is safe and the whole infrastructure is safe. And also, no matter how much guardrail you put in place, there's always runtime risks. That's why we think it's very important to have a dynamic monitoring system like what we have in our firewall, like Mark mentioned, our AIR's product, so that we can in real time monitoring what the input, the output, and what goes into the model, what the model is doing, what comes out of the model, so that we can take not only we can monitor that, but also need to be able to take actions if we see anything suspicious. And we can also do policy recommendation. We can, when it comes to devices, IoT devices, OT devices, medical devices, we can also do segmentation, micro segmentation, put the most infrastructure critical infrastructure devices into a separate zone, and we have special policy coming in and out of that. So I think it's not as simple as just, okay, it just puts one guardrail that can fit all the deployment, all the use cases. It can be case by case, and also guardrail itself is not enough. We need a holistic security solutions. That's why we think the platformization is very important. We collect data statically, dynamically, and we have all these different tools, all these different guardrails in place to secure your data, to secure your operation.
Awesome. Well, I know we're at time, but if you can each leave us with maybe a few words of advice in less than 30 seconds of what folks should continue to consider as they look to secure AI agents in their infrastructure or those systems they're navigating. Steven, do you want to start? All right, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say I'll start just because I have this conversation every day with the senior execs, and that's be cognizant of data. So data is key and your classification of data matters. So things that are secret or classified for your organization. The apps are merely conduits to that data and attack surface. And then it's the relationship of the users and systems that touch the data that matter. So if you use those as guiding tenets, it's easier to identify use cases that will really help your business versus become a huge increase in attack surface.
Thank you, Mark. May, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I agree to what Mark said, and also what Mark mentioned at the very beginning. I think it's very key to have the visibility so that you know what your employees are doing, what your agents are all doing. And from our engineering, R&D, research and development perspective, we do find that we're spending more time. Originally, we spent lots of time on models, but now we spend more time on data and infrastructure to make sure they are safe.
Thank you. And last but not least, Stephen.
Yeah, I just want to echo the point around not foregoing or like ignoring existing standards. I know the temptation is to think that there's got to be some net new, protocol or something coming that's going to help us solve these problems. But look back. I mean, look back at some of the existing standards and specs around auth and everything, and you might be surprised at what you can do with what already exists today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Stephen, May, Mark, and the HITEC team for this opportunity. We hope to see you all soon at one of the upcoming events and hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and week.
Thank you, everyone. If you could take a quick moment to access the survey that is linked in the chat, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.